Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. I'm loving it. Just kidding. This isn't sponsored by McDonald's yet. We wouldn't feed you that industrial sludge. What is up, freaks? It's your boy Marty Ben here to introduce this episode of Tales from the Crypt. Back on the Bitcoin technical side, talking about Impervious.ai, which is a team building an API that allow individuals to build tools that leverage the Lightning Network to create data storage and transfer apps that compete with centralized data collectors like Facebook, VPNs, an expansive list of service providers, if you will. Layer 3. I think Impervious can easily be considered layer 3. There's a budding layer 3 on top of Bitcoin and the Lightning Network. I'm sure there's some on top of Liquid as well. Layered stack. It's getting built out, freaks. It's getting built out. And this is a really interesting project, really interesting team. And they've got something that seems to work. They're launching their API in a couple weeks. You guys will hear all about it in the episode, during which I interview the CEO, co-founder, Chase Perkins. This was brought to you by our good friends at the motherfucking Cash App. Cash App's helping you stack sats, send sats, receive sats, sell sats, if you so please. We're saying sats. 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 Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. I'm loving sats. We're taking it from McDonald's. Screw you, Ronald. We're saying sats because sats are the standard. There's 100 million sats in one Bitcoin. You don't need to stack a whole Bitcoin, a fraction of Bitcoin. You can stack whole sats instead. Cash App makes that very easy. You can DCA into sats. You can set it and forget it. You set a set amount. You can buy daily, weekly, or bi-weekly. You can get sats back on their boost sometimes. They have their Bitcoin boost. You go use the boost card wherever Visa's accepted when the boost is available, and you get sats back there. If not, you can use your boost partner merchants and other deals to get cash back that you can then use to stack sats. On top of that, Cash App can be your bank account. They're offering account numbers and routing numbers so you can get your paychecks direct deposited into the app. They're doing it. They're doing it, freaks. Download the Cash App if you haven't done so yet. Use the code STACKINGSATS. That's STACKINGSATS. You're going to get $10, and $10 is going to go to our good friends at Owls Lacrosse. That's Owls Lacrosse. Owls Lacrosse. This was also brought to you by good friends at Hodl. Hodl is here with a product that allows you to not have to sell your Bitcoin if you need liquidity. Lend at Hodl. Hodl is a new non-custodial Bitcoin-backed lending platform that allows peer-to-peer lending and borrowing between users globally, anonymously, and on your own terms. Available to U.S. citizens as well. The only Hodl, or one of the few Hodl products is available to U.S. customers, and that is because it's non-custodial. No KYC, no AML. Here's how it works. If you're short funds, you don't need to sell your Bitcoin. Get some liquidity by borrowing. Using your Bitcoin as collateral on the lend.hodl platform. And the way it works is you put your Bitcoin up as collateral. You put it in a multi-sig escrow account. You hold one key. Your counterparty holds one key, and Hodl holds one key. The benefit of this is while you don't have control, you can't move the sats out during the duration of your loan, obviously, because you need to pay that back. And if you had control, it just wouldn't make any sense. So you hold one key, your counterparty holds one key, Hodl holds the third. Beauty of this is since you hold a key, you have visibility into the multi-sig wallet. You can see that your sats are in the wallet and not being rehypothecated. So you know that they're there. If you're paying back your loan, your sats are going to come back to you after the loan is paid back. If you have some stable coins laying around, you're looking to get some returns, you can enter the other side of this order book. You put your stable coins up to be lent out, and you get a yield on that for people who are looking for liquidity and don't want to sell their Bitcoin. So they'll put their Bitcoin up as collateral. We'll give them their stable coins, and they'll pay you back what you gave them plus interest. Create your offers and set your own terms on lend.hodl.com. It's lend.hodl.com. This was also brought to you by good friends at Compass Mining. Compass Mining is here to get more individuals into the mining game. And the way they do this is they set up good relationships with the mining ASIC manufacturers, so Bitmain, MicroBT. They allow users to go to compassmining.io. You pick a miner, the mining model you want. They get it for you. And then you pick a hosting provider. They're trying to get you a miner and then competitive electricity cost rates. So You'll get your miner. You'll choose from a plethora of hosting facilities that you can plug it in. Again, at competitive electricity rates. You get the miner. You pick the hosting facility. Compass gets the miner. They give you the VN number, so that you have a specific miner that's dedicated to you. They plug it in at that hosting facility of your choice, and they start streaming the sats mined with that Bitcoin, or excuse me, with that miner to a wallet of your choice. You pay the electricity cost, you pay down the miner, and then you just get the sats on top of that. Go to compassmining.io, compassmining.io to check it out. We got a special link in the show notes if you guys are interested. Using the link helps us out. Last but not least, this rip was brought to you by our good friends at Braiins. Braiins is the team behind Slush Pool. Slush Pool, obviously, the oldest mining pool in Bitcoin. The first. The oldest, the first. Longest lasting. But we're not here to talk about, so we'll talk about it a little bit at the end. What we're here to talk about is the Braiins OS Plus Manager. Okay, so the first update, it's a new product. It's an online platform that enables miners to remotely monitor and manage all their ASICs running Braiins OS Plus. Right, so Braiins OS Plus is the firmware that they offer that allows you to stack more sats with your hash for particular mining models. So if you're running Braiins OS Plus firmware on your miners, you can now leverage the Braiins OS Plus Manager. This will help miners improve uptime and keep their farms running optimally without the hassle of needing to be on site 24/7. The manager is and will always be free for Braiins OS Plus miners. Free 99 freaks. And they can connect to an unlimited number of devices. You can monitor this on your phone, your laptop, your tablet, whatever tickles your fancy. And security and efficiency were the top priorities with Braiins OS Plus Manager. It uses Stratum v2 for smaller and less frequent data transfers, with all ASIC configuration and telemetry data being sent via encrypted connections, which protect against eavesdropping and man-in-the-middle attacks. Very important. You don't want somebody to jack your hash. Make sure you're using Stratum v2, which Braiins OS Plus Manager does leverage. Braiins OS Plus firmware does leverage. So for details on the manager and how to set it up with your mining operation, go to braiins.com/blog and check out the Braiins OS Plus Manager launch article. That's Braiins, BRAIINS.com, BRAIINS.com/blog. Check out the Braiins OS Plus Manager launch. And then on top of that, we're still waiting. Slush Pool apparently is getting a major update. The first major update in many years. We'll have some new industry first features, including ultra flexible payout system, customizable mining reward splitting, and best of all, dark theme for 24/7 hash rate monitoring. That's easy on the eyes. Follow slush_pool on Twitter to see the announcement when the pool update goes live. And enjoy this rip. It feels like things are happening. Everybody's focused on DeFi, but Bitcoin in layers is starting to integrate itself into the bigger, larger internet stack. Enjoy, freaks. Enjoy your day. Enjoy your life. Live it. You only got one. Tiki.
You've had a dynamic where money's become freer than free.
If you talk about a Fed just gone nuts, all the central banks going nuts.
So it's all acting like safe haven.
I believe that in a world where central bankers are tripping over themselves to devalue their currency, Bitcoin wins. In the world of fiat currencies, Bitcoin is the victor.
I mean, that's part of the bull case for Bitcoin.
If you're not paying attention, you probably should be.
What is up, freaks? Welcome back to Tales from the Crypt. Your boy Marty Bent here on a lovely Monday afternoon now where I am, morning where my guest is. I'm sitting down with Chase Perkins, CEO of Impervious AI. Chase, what's going on, sir?
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, Marty. Thanks for having us on.
Coming on. Like I was saying, we were having like a little pre-podcast powwow, as tends to happen when we're about to record a podcast. I was introduced to you by Desiree Dickerson at Lightning Labs. Had a conversation with Ryan Gentry this morning about what you guys are building, and saw your presentation at Bitcoin Magazine, Bitcoin 2021, hosted by Bitcoin Magazine. It seems like you are building something extremely interesting, leveraging the Lightning Network. Impervious, like we were saying, you're building a VPN, but that's just one application of what you're building. So I guess let's just jump into it.
Totally.
And like, what is Impervious? Why did you guys build it? And how are you leveraging Lightning?
Yes. So Impervious is building like layer 3 of Bitcoin, like a programmatic layer, like you were saying. So anyone can build on Lightning or Bitcoin and reap the benefits of censorship resistant, surveillance resistant technology without necessarily understanding anything about Bitcoin or Lightning. So as we know, programmatic money is just the beginning. So if you were to enable streaming micropayments, video, podcast, audiobook, presentations, anything, you can go peer-to-peer with kind of a traditional application or service or from the ground up. So yeah, we're this programmatic layer and we're super excited about it. Like, and I appreciate the plug from Des and Ryan at Lightning. They've been incredible and very supportive of us. And, they've really led the way with this elegant technology. With that real-time layer 2 settlement layer, you can do so much more than just real-time settlement of payments. Like you can enable this like peer-to-peer, like cryptographically secure, resilient, censorship-resistant communication channels. Like, so yeah, happy to discuss it.
Yeah, like I was saying, we've talked about the idea of having a VPN running through the Lightning Network for, it feels like a couple of years now, at least, on Tales from the Crypt. I've had conversations with other individuals building on the Lightning Network and said, yeah, it's possible. And that's what you guys demoed at Bitcoin 2021 was this VPN. So I guess just to give the freaks out there a practical application of what you're building, how does the VPN work?
Well, freaks, engaged thrusters. So basically, we're using Lightning as a key send layer, a config credentialing layer, where once you establish configs or credentials between, say, me and Marty over the Lightning Network, so we're using it as a transport layer just for key send, we then can establish out-of-band, resilient, censorship resistant, like cryptographically secure channels. So basically for one humble Satoshi, you can open up and establish, okay, how are we going to chat off of Lightning? And then we stream peer-to-peer this out-of-band channel. And that can be used, it can be incorporated into anything or just be a standalone function. So it's really powerful. It protects, it shields the sender and the receiver, so the broadcasting party and the receiver, and obviously double encrypts at transport and at rest the data. So there's a lot of strategic and like tactical applications. We're speaking with some really interesting parties about being able to access from behind hostile networks, denied access areas, and basically surveyed networks where privacy and security is paramount.
So you're basically attempting to create a product and experience that gives users more peace of mind that their third-party VPN provider isn't a honeypot. So the way I understand, you guys are leveraging routing nodes to make this happen, correct? So an individual will be able to pick routing nodes in different jurisdictions.
Yeah, and so that's one of them, but we dynamically, so basically like once a connection is established and it's ephemeral, so these wormholes cryptographically between me and you disappear in the ether once we're done chatting, right? So we use Lightning to establish credentials to say, how are we going to chat? We open an out-of-band channel. And then when we're done chatting, like that disappears. There's no retroactive, inspection of those communications. But that's just the start. Like, again, we are beneficiaries of our own API. What we're really excited about is the Impervious AI API, which is like the SDK for iOS, early iOS developers, using Xcode. This is actually from Brian Murray at Craft. This is how he said what we're doing back to us. He's like, early on, everyone had to use a specific SDK. That's what you are. You're like the AstroTurf. And so we're excited to basically, again, be layer 3 and let everyone start ripping. We think it's a moral imperative. intermediaries and gatekeepers are atrocious custodians of our data, and it's unnecessary, right? So
So like beyond the VPN, how do you see this progressing? How do you see people leveraging your API to build tools?
Sure.
How do they preserve your data when compared to storing it on the cloud or trusting a Facebook or a Twitter, whatever?
Yeah, good example. So we're working with everything from, like, I think you may have chatted with Justin Revzani of like End to End. We were chatting right before we hopped on now, and so whether you're building from the ground up, like a decentralized network, and Justin and I, they're going to do great stuff, and with Impervious, to podcasts, we're working with a different social network that live streams basically content to YouTube, and this way they could also toggle on, almost like OnlyFans, like toggle on for secure private paid, or just premium paywall, like party to party, peer to peer, working with publishers, and then just like for routine data transmission, like if it doesn't have to be stored in perpetuity in the cloud, it shouldn't be. And as we know, like we were saying, intermediaries, whether it's Facebook, Google, Department of Justice, Office of Personal Management, the reality is they're all vulnerable and susceptible to hacks and breaches and shouldn't just be sitting there. So it's okay to use these third parties. What we're doing is shifting discretion and control and standardizing privacy and censorship resistant technology. So like, an existing application or platform or service can continue as is, but start building in capacity where they're basically less significant custodians, and shifting that, like streaming peer-to-peer when possible, and like not holding any data that's not absolutely essential for their operations.
And so from a technical perspective, at the Lightning, like you already explained key send and stuff like that. So let's go back to like the VPN example. How is Alice leveraging the Lightning Network to send, or to spin up a VPN, to use it as a VPN? Like, how is she streaming sats to routing nodes? Like hypothetically, the way I understand it, like a user could just say, hey, all right, I'm going to do some web browsing that I would like to use a VPN for. And they can just be like, all right, for the next 30 minutes, I'm going to pick routing node in jurisdiction XYZ, routing nodes in jurisdictions XYZ, and flow my traffic through them and pay X amount of sats. Is that a correct representation?
Yeah, I think that's like part of, that's like one of the features, right? Select your own routing nodes. But I think like metaphor helps, and this happens to be a specific concrete example. So let's say Alice and Bob, let's say Alice is in Taiwan, and one of our goals is to develop like a redundant civilian communication network in Taiwan. So the parties in Taiwan can always send and receive information without fear of reprisal or recourse. And in order to do that, maybe they're choosing the nodes of which they're going through, or maybe Alice is just saying, hey, I want to chat with Bob. Now, if you had a private network like pre-established before you're in Taiwan, that's less problematic because you already know who you're chatting to and trusting. But Lightning enables you to, in a trustless capacity, establish this like key send back and forth between me and you, between Alice and Bob. They now have synced up, and there's an out-of-band cryptographically secure channel, and it's high bandwidth, right? And it's free. So it only takes one humble Satoshi to like ping back and forth. And as long as our credentials are in sync, then we're just like in agreement to the form and capacity in which we're communicating out of band. So it's pretty wild, and it's like a natural. So that's why we're jumping all the way to fighting tyranny, right? The shadow of the CCP. And let's double back on like kind of the moral imperative there, and information warfare and information dominance, because that all ties back into kind of our use cases.
Yeah. And so with that one sat send, like, is it just obviously it's key send, so it's sending a message where the message say like, here is here's the way in which we're engaging And so you're
That's
just
right.
using that.
So then you're just using through SSH, FTP, just raw internet, and you're establishing the channel in which to communicate. And that out of band channel is cryptographically secure. So basically the key send establishes credentials, peer-to-peer connectivity, and then we just go straight peer-to-peer. So like Impervious, Lightning, no one can see what's happening out of band, and no nefarious third-party hostile actor or party surveying. And does that make sense?
Yeah, no, totally makes sense. And so it seems like Impervious is an idea that you've been thinking about and working on for quite some time.
Yeah.
Was it Lightning that made you comfortable to go build this stuff, or?
Yeah. Well, Lightning was definitely the catalyst where we've been thinking about it a long time. Like my team, so me, Mark Stites and Colin Crossman, the founders of Impervious AI, had all been working on this in various capacities and had known each other professionally through different circles. And when we linked up around, I guess, January 21, it was clear that like we had a clear go to action. And like Mark, our CTO, he was a cryptographer in the Air Force and decades of DoD and IC experience building networks, everything from like our infrared satellite networks, to like leading red teaming, to signals intelligence, to like target package workup. So he'd been thinking about how to protect and exploit networks for a very long time. And I've been working on it from a different angle, from a data privacy component. And when we linked up, and it turned out his thesis at Harvard and his graduate thesis was like fault tolerant, federated cloud computing with basically, I don't say proposing Lightning, but it was definitely via Bitcoin. What would that look like if you had a real time, basically, like key send layer? And I'm paraphrasing a little bit because he used his own terminology, but we had all been thinking about this, and then we figured out how to do it and hit the ground running. And like in 30, 60 days, we had our prototype up, we had like stuff running, we built the VPN on the API, and we're like, oh my God, it's real. And then we really started riffing, right? Like, so we tweeted at Lightning Labs, using Lightning as a transport layer. So this is like with a VPN, you're mostly out of band, right? You're doing key send to then establish an out of band connection. But you can also do it over, if it's below, I guess, 356, 354 bytes, you can do it in band, right? On chain. And so we started tweeting at Lightning. Have you ever seen someone use Lightning as a transport layer tweet? And like, what? No. And then Ryan, reached out and we kind of hit the ground running from there and got a lot of support, and it helped kind of shape the vision and really kind of bring it to fruition really quickly.
Mm-hmm. So why Lightning and not some other like blockchain application or your own?
Yeah.
So
I think it depends on the application. So like step one, first of all, we're big Bitcoiners. Like we're all actually relatively early Bitcoin miners. So we already like believe in the technology. It's established, distributed compute, and obviously payment built into the rails of Bitcoin isn't just a feature. It's tantamount to being able to punch through surveyed hostile controlled networks. Like you can create this wormhole, these cryptographically secure channels because of Bitcoin and because of Lightning. So, in the simplest sense, that you could start over, but why reinvent the wheel? Right? It's already there. We're already on board. Let's stand on the shoulders and backs of giants, right? And keep going.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? Like everybody's like, we need our own blockchain for all these applications. Like, I'm not so sure. I think like the stacked, layered approach makes sense, and it's good. It's just,
well, yeah. Well, so when you think about like Ethereum or like Filecoin, it's parties and other protocols have tried to push large amounts of data right through the blockchain before, but like obviously, if every time you go to use it, it's expensive, it breaks, it's congested, it's slow. Like that's not a viable alternative for like practical applications.
No. And then you're just fracturing the network effect on top of that as well. It's like another thing, like how important is the network effect of the network you're building on? Like how many people can it scale to? It's arguable. You can make the argument that you're going to want to be building all this stuff in layers on Bitcoin just for the network effect alone, if you want your stuff to get in the hands of people.
You definitely, and it also aligns with our ethos of, sound money is great. Again, huge Bitcoiners, but what good is economic empowerment without freedom of speech, without freedom of thought, which I think it all aligns. And that's why it's a natural iteration. Like they can be one and the same. And we'd like to build on that instead of having separate systems, right? One achieving sound money, one achieving sound mind. I'm like, no. Let's just fairly yeah.
And yeah, you guys are proving that Bitcoin should not be pigeonholed as digital gold or some store value alone. Like this is a meme that's been getting more popular. I think Ross Stevens and Michael Saylor's conversation, then Jack Mallers as well, leaning into this, like the asset versus the network, and especially the network in a layered fashion, and the Lightning Network and what it can do, like the potential of this network to change the interactions. What Impervious is focused on is making sure that the interactions secure freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of autonomy in the digital age. Like what?
Absolutely.
Just talking about the VPN now, but like what crazy applications is this going to enable in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, so look, if you think about Jack Ma, let's take a step back. Like the way I usually say it, whether it's matters of war and peace, public safety and public health, governance, when it's most critical that we can express dissent and participate in society or challenge a public narrative or consensus, when it's most essential that we can participate is when it's most likely that we're to be censored, deplatformed, vested parties are going to intimidate. And like this is all wrapped into like a much deeper and darker, I think, trend of cultural Marxism, where like, using force and intimidation to get your way, where you're basically attacking centers of power. And ultimately, it doesn't matter if your argument or your vision or what you're working on makes sense or is best or is rational, because like ultimately, if you can obtain the power center, you can retroactively legitimize yourself, which is like the same as every despot and two-bit, conqueror and warlord in history, and so like, just for a real world example, like, Jack Ma, wealthiest guy in China, definitely the wealthiest guy in the history of modern China. He ran afoul of the parties that be. He's got all the resources in the world, most powerful technology companies that they critical to their infrastructure, I think it's fair to say, and society. And like, he was muzzled.
Where is he? Has anybody seen Jack Ma?
Yeah, I don't know if they've seen him in the last couple of weeks, but I know in the last week they've continued dismantling his empire. And they're now distributing it to, quote, trusted parties. So, they're nationalizing or distributed, and they're making an example out of him. And I'm like, look, I mean, it'd almost be like, if the mafia, like old school mafia, were to like conquer Italy, and let's say that like they were pretty good at doing certain things, right? Like wine and cheese is going well and exports are going well. And the people are like, from a macro perspective, collectively on average, doing better than they were. And people are like, well, this is great. And isn't this kind of a form of capitalism? And you're like, wait. That's all well and good until you question them, right? As long as you acquiesce to the parties that be. And it all gets back to like Bitcoin and Jack Ma. It's like, this is without anyone's permission, right? Like it's imperative to have sound mind and also have a cryptographically secure record. So when we talk about censorship and building censorship and surveillance resistant technology, people oftentimes think of like censorship resistance as like binary, like, you can either speak freely or not speak at all. But like CCP is like far more nuanced. While they sometimes do use sledgehammers and like, more overt tactics, like they will retroactively modify group chats to favorably represent or more favorably represent communications from, historically how you said or portrayed something. I was like, whoa. This is way, way darker than people realize.
That's like, well, gaslighting. Like, did I write this? Like, you get
Oh yeah, it's like you're taking crazy pills, right? Like I said, everyone who's ever tried to use brute force to legitimize their position, retroactively can do that. And obviously with artificial intelligence and their massive information dominance, they're in a position to do that and always like shift things in a slightly more favorable light to whatever they're willing to tolerate. And I was like, well, this is really dark. And the reality is, if we don't default to secure, this is what I'm talking about, cutting out intermediaries. It's not just like like an F the man. Like, I mean, there's a little bit of that. Okay, there's a lot of that. But the reality is, like, when you're relying on a third party custodian, like, you don't have discretion and control over how it's used or manipulated. And so, Bitcoin can allow, and then via real-time streaming peer-to-peer, this secure, authentic, legitimate, and like uncorruptible version of truth and reality. And like, if we don't build this, like, things are going to, I think, get, they'll deteriorate much further before they get better, if they ever can. And if we want our digital reality to reflect our physical reality in any meaningful way, like, this has to be like a deliberate step. And the technology's here. Like I said, like, we can't take full credit, right? We're developing a natural iteration of what already exists, this incredible distributed compute and code and trusted layer that happens to be trustless. So yeah, we're super, super psyched.
Yeah, so let's dig into that, like the actual data transfer and then storage or lack of storage. So how does it work compared to like leveraging Impervious's API? Like,
sure.
Is the data stored on a routing node? Is it completely ephemeral? Is it, obviously it's encrypted within the network, within the communications channels, and then on the endpoints, I would imagine. And then, like, so is the data only accessible due to key sense? So like, you're using Lightning Network as a quasi like identify, like you're using node identities to be able to access data that's being shared on the network. Is that how it works? Or
so yeah, I think there were two different ideas there. So if you're using, so again, we go back to the API level layer, and the API provides discretion into how you would like to and in what capacity use Lightning or Bitcoin and streaming peer-to-peer. So like, you may host on AWS your conventional social network or publishing or podcast or or video broadcast, but all AWS would see, and this is just one example, is that there is a Lightning channel basically opened to AWS, and then there's a virtual machine running on it. And this is an example of how someone might think of from a technical level how to incorporate this. So AWS would just see, okay, there's encrypted traffic, and they wouldn't know who it is or how or why. There's a little bit more there, but the reality is where it's stored and how it's stored is still up to the developers, but it allows for, let's say, whether that's live or whether you after the fact store it somewhere, you're streaming peer-to-peer for the duration of that connection. And then the VPN is an example of that ephemeral real-time connection where you can broadcast, send, and receive. And as long as you have a Satoshi, it's like WireGuard, Tor, Blue Wallet mashed together like an incentivized Tor to ensure this cryptographically secure channel, you can broadcast and send. So the VPN is a specific example, but like, we see, I don't want to, like, it's like telling an artist like how to put bounds on streaming, because it's streaming micropayments, it's streaming video, it's streaming, like, it's on the rails, like, and the broadcaster can determine the scale and the rate and the cost. So what's really cool, so for one Satoshi bouncing back and forth, let's say just using API for not the VPN, but just the API for peer-to-peer streaming on a platform, you're the broadcasting party. People think peer-to-peer, they tend to think 1-to-1. But that ratio can be 1 to 50, 1 to 10,000, 1 to 50,000. It's scalable. It just means that there's no intermediary, but you're still from the broadcasting party to the receiving party. And so that's why it's so mind-bending. People are like, oh, well, peer-to-peer doesn't work. I was like, well, peer-to-peer is scalable. That can be in parallel. So you can be broadcasting right now to every single one of your listeners, peer-to-peer with no intermediary, no iTunes, no YouTube, or an equivalent, decentralized version. So yeah, that's how we're
Never thought of
positioned.
it that way. I always thought of peer-to-peer as one-to-one, like one to
Mhm.
1,000.
Well, it's still 1-to-1, but it can be, like the like gigabit, right? Like you are streaming in parallel to all 50,000 of your listeners. It's still just, they're all still getting, Marty time 101, but there's no one in between, but you're also in parallel talking to everyone else.
Yeah. It's fascinating. And again, like sticking on the data, like, so how, I guess, like, all right, how would one attack this? How would one try to get Impervious AI's users' data? Like, they would need to have the private key of the node, correct?
Right. So like, you're not going to like break the legit curve cryptography, right? So we're minimizing the attack vector. It's not that there aren't ways to exploit. And that's why I was like, you still need sound engineering, right? But it provides discretion and control. So, all right, if we take a step back and we think of like telecoms, right? So there are common carrier laws that say that telecoms, AT&T, Verizon, whomever, if you call a phone number, they have to connect end to end, right? Like there is one phone number to another, and it used to be physically, there used to be operators like taking out wires and plugging in and connecting end to end, one line to another. Right now it's digital, but under common carrier law, if one phone calls another, they have to connect it regardless of who they are or for what purpose, what pretext. And so, but on our digital reality, we have now moved to this preemptive prior restraint pretext for surveillance and interference in society where, well, you don't want to enable this conduct, or what if they said something bad or said something we disagree with? And this party would say you're the hosting platform or party, and they're like, you're now an enabler or, essentially facilitating this behavior. I'm like, well, AT&T is not facilitating behavior. By the way, if you break the law over the phone, you actually are violating a number of additional laws. So like, you're not abdicated of like civil and criminal liability just because you're using secure communication. And a lot of people, but they want to use this brute force mentality, this prior restraint of like, yeah, but what are you going to use it for? I'm like, stop it. Like the Michael Jordan, gif, like, get some help. Like, no.
Well, they are trying to. That's the thing. They're like, oh, Bitcoin's used by criminals. That's always my go-to example. Like, criminals speak with each other on the phone. You don't do anything.
Yeah. Wait till they hear about money, right? Or or phones. Like, and there's nothing stopping us from like sitting in our like living room and like conspiring to do something terrible. And even then, it's just really funny because and I was speaking to a party, I don't want to out them because they end up becoming a friend and we're working with them, but let's say a hyper affluent hedge fund guy who was like, look, this is great, I love it, but we all know, how are you going to push back when they come for your heads when they say, hey, everyone knows you only need privacy if you only need true privacy, like hard encryption, if you're doing something wrong. And, I obviously did not see eye to eye with that. And I was like, but that's why I like the China example, the CCP specific example of like, it's not just, first of all, it's none of your business what I'm doing, but it's also this like non-binary manipulation where perhaps you would like your message delivered exactly as intended. Like literally the game Telephone. Remember as a kid playing Telephone?
Yeah, whisper down the lane, telephone, whatever it may be, whenever people call.
I was always the worst. Because it's like, you got to mix it up. You got 30 kids in a circle and you say something. And by the time it, arrives to the last person, it does not resemble the original, message. Yeah. And you'd think we would learn from that game, because as we rely and provide discretion to intermediaries, what's really happening is each layer of the tech stack is really serving as a choke point for freedom of speech and expression. Mm-hmm. And the Electronic Frontier Foundation actually has a great article. It's free speech beyond Parler and the tech stack, and it really addresses the reality of like, just like when I was speaking to like Alex from Human Rights Foundation, right? Like they were victims of parties aggressively pursuing DMCA takedown notices. And this is something I saw a lot practicing law, which is like, the reality is, this will be mind bending, I think, for most people. There are, that we know of, at least 5 billion with a B DMCA takedown notices per month. Per month. And so, like, to the listeners, like, you go to YouTube and you see a video has been taken down because there's some alleged copyright violation or use of a song without permission. What people don't realize is, like, it's relatively, there's free software and templates online where you just fill it in, and you can either crawl the internet, you search it, and for a keyword like Marty Bent, and you send that, right? Or you can target an individual, and you can just distribute and send these preformed, what appear to be legitimate DMCA takedown requests. And one of the crazy things about the DMCA, the way it's written is that it provides notice to the platform or party, that intermediary that's receiving it, that they are now on notice, that they are potentially incurring criminal liability for violation of federal copyright law. And at the beginning of movies where it's like, 10 years, yeah. Like, these are, people don't realize, like, federal copyright law is like heavy, right? Like, they're trying to extradite Kim.com primarily on that basis. There are additional charges, and I don't want to speak to specifics of the case, but so if you're a platform or service provider and you receive thousands or hundreds of thousands of these per month, you have to make a policy internally. And usually that policy looks like this, and each party is different. If we receive what appears to be a mildly credible or possibly meritorious DMCA takedown notice, do we want to go to the mat protecting this user and spending time and resources on this particular user and account? Or would we prefer to just remove the content, suspend the account, or take whatever action you find appropriate so you can say my hands are washed, right? Very Pontius Pilate-esque. And and the reality is, and you do feel for the platforms, because even if in this capacity, where even if they wanted to start from that position, it is a difficult position. If you're receiving lots of potentially notice of incurring for facilitating violation of federal copyright law. So it's become a very effective tool for censorship and control.
Matt Odell contributes at least 4 DMCA takedowns a month with Citadel Dispatch. He puts a song on the end of every one, and he never pays for the copyright. It just gets taken.
Yeah, exactly. And it's incredible. And so it's a very effective mechanism. So whether it's DMCA takedown notice, or whether it's just an arbitrary change of policy or perceived violation of terms of service, like the analogy I give, and that was in my talk, was like, look, our digital infrastructure is like, if you're renting a car, you're driving down the road, they think you're running late. Instead of sending you a notice and saying, hey, you're going to receive a late fee, you need to return the vehicle and escalate accordingly, they just remote kill your car in the middle of traffic, right? Like, that's what our digital infrastructure looks like. These third-party intermediaries and gatekeepers we rely on, there's a violation of terms of service or perceived violation of terms of service, if there's a policy change, if there's a DMCA takedown notice, they just remote kill without the ability to contest or arbitrate. And God forbid, you may have a different position, or would like to contest, or you would like time to migrate to a new platform or service. Yeah.
No, they'll just take you down. It's crazy.
It's a much more efficient way of why have a conversation when you can just stop it, right? Use the hammer.
Right. And now I'm just thinking of ways like how Lightning fixes this too. Like, instead of even going through that DCMA or DMCA, I keep forgetting.
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like, imagine if hopefully we transition to a world where it's like more independent artists and they're getting more of the money. It's like cheaper to produce and distribute content now than ever before in history. But hypothetically, like, again, with streaming sats, with Sphinx and stuff like that, like, once you add a video, it's like, all right, send 2% that's to, or whatever percentage it needs to be to pay for this content.
That's right. And I think that's where this started from on that diatribe, was that, like, if you as the broadcaster can determine it's 1 Satoshi a minute or a second or whatever you'd like to set it to, it also empowers, right, the parties, and it provides like full discretion control. And so it provides both like a financial mechanism, but also a technical mechanism where I think for platforms or services, whether it's like a Substack or that wants to, build into their ethos, we don't want to be the parties dictating, and controlling what's being written and spoken. Or whether you're like a YouTube, where ultimately I think they should all have a mechanism where they're like, look, if the broadcasting party decides to toggle on peer-to-peer, like that's out of our hands. And Fireside Chat's doing some really cool stuff. Fallon, shout out to Fallon. She's a friend of mine, and her co-founders, Mark Cuban, they're doing some really cool stuff, and that's in the works where you can toggle on peer-to-peer. So you're broadcasting, to your typical audience via YouTube, via Instagram and Facebook, but also like maybe you're in an area or part of the world where what a party has to say would be frowned upon, and you don't want that associated, right? So this is with a chilling effect, but maybe you would like the ability to consume, to send and receive information. And so like Fireside or Marty's listeners might decide, like, for this, like, I'm going to toggle on, and maybe it costs $1, maybe it's just free and it's just one Satoshi back and forth, but it allows parties to know they can always send and receive information, right? They can always get there. And it's at your discretion. Like we were saying, it doesn't abdicate responsibility. It's not like a magic universe. Like, hey, look, that's on you.
And that's something we say a lot too. Like, again, like you said, it doesn't abdicate responsibility. If you're going to do illegal things, like you probably will get accosted by the enforcers who are sent to reprimand you for doing those illegal things. But it just, the way in which these platforms, particularly on the internet, are set up now, it's just like, all right, cut everything off at the head. And it just completely reduces everything to like a hammer, instead of like actually having authorities do like good detective work and good follow-up to attack individuals that are doing the crimes, instead of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, which is what the policy is now.
It's definitely the policy. And this goes back to the example I was saying about cultural Marxism, of just like using force, which is ultimately even the parties like platforms and service providers or institutions that might start from a good position, or at least a defensible one, like that will all get eroded at the edges as long as there are mechanisms to silence, and you'll be attacked and you'll be questioned, and your policies will become increasingly narrow of what you tolerate, because everyone knows that actually we're going to hold you responsible for what your content creators are saying or doing on your platform, or how people are using it. And like, and that's one of the things that like scares me about like self-driving cars. Like, God forbid I violate Apple's terms of service and I'm like stuck on the 405.
Right? It's like Minority Report really coming true. That was like one of the most illuminating parts of that movie, is when he gets in the autonomous car and just drives him to a place where he doesn't want to be. It's like,
that's right. And everyone sees that, right? And I think, obviously like society and geopolitics, like our social construct reflects the reality. And everyone knows that like, if you can use hammers, if you can pressure and disparage, if you can use magic words, you can throw spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks, like something will, and then you can just like attack it and concentrate. And I was like, look, I think like the reality is like right now we are drafting the equivalent of the Federalist Papers for our digital reality. And, Federalist Papers, for the listeners, right, were the inspiration for and the foundation for the Constitution, and the structure of government was discussed. And so it's one of the coolest things about the Federalist Papers, by the way, side note, is that, when people say, oh, just like the hyper affluent dude who's like, you only need privacy if you're doing something wrong. I go, well, like, let's us not forget that they were all published pseudo-anonymously.
Yeah, they're all
right? Right. Like Madison was Publius, right? Like Hamilton was whatever, someone else. And like, so they're all having this public debate on the merits, on the issues. Specifically, it's not like human nature has changed in the last 250 years, right? Like specifically to prevent ad hominem attacks on them, because everyone's name and reputation and associations and affiliations, it's easier to attack that than have an intellectually honest conversation on substance. And they knew that back then. So, the the foundation for it, and you kind of look at, Satoshi, right? Like there's a time and a place. And I think that right now we are establishing those constructs because like our rule of law or just the things we take for granted haven't reflected well in our digital infrastructure. And, it's imperative that we don't just like nod along until, like we're in a dystopia around the world.
I think it's hard for people to grasp how early we are in this digital age too.
Oh yeah.
Like, so what would you say, like, if these are technologies that, God forbid, technologies that are going to be here for the foreseeable future, into perpetuity, if you will?
Sure.
Like my meteor or a super volcano. Like imagine like just going with the assumption that humanity persists.
So this is like one of my favorite things to discuss, actually, which like, I can't go to China anyway. So like with the CCP, if they were to have their way and continue just like extrapolate on like the current trajectory that they're on, right, of information dominance and control, manipulation, and being able to retrospectively alter records, like once we have like deep neural brain implants, or once we have any type of augmentation, or even if it's just a prosthetic and like the lowercase p sense of like we're just more increasingly reliant on external data sources, like if you can manipulate that, you can manipulate reality. And like, so if you win, like if that, you go out 50, 100, 150, 250 years, and if like ultimately, that as long as you control and you have information dominance, any battle today is tactical because ultimately you can retroactively not just legitimize, but reconstruct reality. So people don't, like the old, remember was it 300, where they were like, I'm not just going to kill you, like I'm going to erase your name from existence. Mm-hmm. Like that's actually what's happening.
Yeah. That I can't stop thinking of the Matrix, but we'll just end up as like energy sources and pods in this VR world. Yeah, it has happened in history too, right? Like the Library of Alexandria, right? And they say like the Nile River was black because of all the ink of everything. Well, not the Nile. Was it the Nile? I don't know what it was.
I think it was the Nile, or maybe it was the Euphrates. No, Nile. Whatever. Yeah. I mean, it's the same idea, right? Like if you can go to the record, and what's more efficient, like if they can control 1 point whatever, I don't want to butcher it, 1.4, 1.6 billion people, it's not that much more difficult to scale that out to 7, especially over a longer timeline, or 9 billion or whatever, 11. And I think, it's possible we could have parallel realities. I like to think we'll ultimately win. I think we've seen such gross malfeasance and abuse on their end that people will have an visceral reaction. And I think we will take concrete steps to hopefully, and it's not central power controlled by any nation state, because we know how that might end up. But I think that like we're in a trend in that direction where hopefully, if we're going to learn any lesson from history, it's look what happens when you have information dominance and control. And it can all end that everything we worked so hard for in a society in an instant. So I like to think that will win out. I know Balaji thinks that like, and I'm actually a big fan of his, that China may be a centralized model that could possibly survive in parallel. I mean, it's when I say survive, I just meant like their current information dominance model. Yeah. And I think we could like reverse that trend, but it's going to take like a very deliberate effort. And so we're coming in hot.
Yeah, no, I mean, to reverse that trend, you need tools, right? Arguably the first 3-4 decades the internet's been around, wherever you want to pinpoint its inception. We haven't had the correct tools until, again, like the original architects of the internet had this idea, this payment layer that wasn't able to be brought to market until Bitcoin launched. Now it's here. Now we have these tools that will enable, hopefully, these digital experiences and products that respect individual liberty in the digital age.
And you bring up an interesting point. And when we say like individual, like liberty, we often talk as a society about, inclusion and tolerance and diversity, but like, what about diversity of thought and the greatest minority, which is the individual? I didn't coin that phrase, by the way. And, I think it was Scalia that said, who taught my con law class, separation of powers course. So like, I'm going to plug him kind of shamelessly, but like, he even said, look, like the purpose of the Constitution ultimately was to protect the minority from the tyranny of the majority. And when we lose the tolerance for dissent, right, for individual thought that may not conform with the consensus, it gets really dangerous really quickly. And like, this is a way to ensure we have that. And obviously that's how you create like a perverse society. I don't think anyone wants to live in like a uniform, maybe someone does, and they have great incentives to further it. But, as we know, like look at World War II, look at history, like sometimes the most technologically advanced societies can be the most ruthless. Like technological advancement does not necessarily equate to wisdom or tolerance. In fact, it can just be a far more efficient tool to further arbitrary policies or agendas.
Yeah.
So
that's arguably what's been happening for the last couple of decades. We have all this technology, and you could make the argument that society's dumber than ever.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think we missed the greatest lessons from World War II, or maybe we knew them for a little bit, but here we are again. What
are those lessons?
So basically, that technological progress does not equate wisdom, and that suppression of individual thought and the individual is really dangerous and attacking people that may not fall in line with an agenda. So like, Berlin in right before World War II was arguably like the most economically, scientifically, culturally, artistically advanced city on earth. It was like Paris plus London plus New York. You had the Prussian academies, you had like really advanced hard sciences, you had great composers, like there was a lot happening. And so like, if we think we're just going to like create a more technologically advanced civilization and that it will, that good will come of it, like we completely missed the boat. And then like all those millions of lives that were lost like horrifically and unnecessarily, will be in vain because it'll happen all over again. And I hope it doesn't. And I think that like, doesn't mean we won't need a few wake up calls, but I think we're seeing it. And I don't want us to miss the boat.
No, I think the wake up calls are here. And I think more and more people are like, all right, where the hell is that boat? We need to focus. Because it's imperative. I would argue it's imperative. Impervious is an imperative.
Impervious. That's right. I think so, man. And I think what you're furthering, and I think your podcast and like the intellectual like discussions are essential. And, and part of it with Impervious, it shouldn't require like leaving your cushy job like we did and like put your middle fingers up to start a free speech, like censorship and surveillance resistant technology company in order to not give a fuck. It really shouldn't require that. But we've as a society moved to a place where like, we're using lawful conduct as a pretext for surveillance and censorship and control. And I was like, whoa. These are all just like funny mechanisms to like undermine privacy, to circumvent the Constitution and due process. And like, because when something terrible happens, the first question is Congress asks, like, what could have been done to prevent this? And while there may have been credible things, like you said, like just good police work, like, depositions and testimony and investigations existed before the internet. The reality is that we increasingly find fringe reasons to conduct, if not real-time surveillance, enable a great rewind button to then retroactively, speak to what was occurring. And like, I think if like stop using lawful conduct as like a pretext for surveillance, like, the Bank Secrecy Act is one of the great evils we ever passed. And obviously we see that further progressing with the regulatory proposal IRS, where reporting real-time bank account balances, deposits and withdrawals. And I'm like, wait, this is like far outside the capacity historically or lawfully of like police powers and regulatory powers and authority. And there was a case, where Scalia again dissented. It was a vigorous dissent, which was on the border, the ability to collect DNA of parties that have been detained in perpetuity, even if they are not charged with a crime. And so, if you're within 3 miles of the border, you're held temporarily and swabbed, and the state now in perpetuity has your genetic composition. And they say, hey, this is important for identifying, but like, guess what? Like, that's far outside the traditional policing powers. And you're literally saying, we are going to keep your genetic information on file just in case, maybe, without your consent and without you being even prosecuted or found guilty. It's so bizarrely terrible. And that's the path we're on.
Well, it sounds like guilty until proven innocent, right? Like all this data collection is under that pretense. Is that a correct?
Yeah. Pretense and pretext, like whatever you can justify. Like we're now using harm reduction hypotheticals to justify surveillance, proactive measures. But guess what? Like, again, lessons we apparently haven't learned in the last 200 years. I thought we learned the hard way. There are always disfavored classes and parties in society, less favored, disfavored, whether that's a religious class, whether that's an ethnic group, whether that's like socioeconomic, whether it's what state or region you're from or country. Like every single one of us at some point in the last 200 years would have been a disfavored party. And we cling to whatever the soup du jour of acceptable notion of decency is. And everyone else is therefore like, it's justifiable to, it's crazy. Like, and when we see the resist movement against, the state and police brutality, it's like, that's great. We should. However, let's not embolden and provide additional mechanisms to then use the power of the state to treat people disproportionately poorly. I was like, whoa, we're missing the boat.
Yeah, it's right. It's like when Bane takes over in Batman, and like the whole
it totally is. Like,
city, let's do it, and then like you get like the trials, and it's just complete chaos, and you're just turning into the monster that you're trying to destroy at that point.
Absolutely. And I think people are just, we're by definition, like life is short. We try to accumulate whatever knowledge, or some people do, before death. But like the reality is that like we delude ourselves into thinking that we now know what's decent. I was like, are you kidding? Are you joking? Like everyone who has ever existed thought they knew what was decent, but you're going to treat anyone who doesn't agree with you differently. And I was like, oh my God.
That's part of the beauty of Bitcoin, right? Is like it is this amoral, dumb protocol, and similar with Lightning, that hopefully it reserves the properties that morality isn't thrust on the network. The network has no moral judgment on what's going on. And then we can figure that out in meat space as this protocol just works.
Absolutely. And it's crazy, like watching politicians get very worked up over their inability and the rules.
Oh no. Chase, I lost you. Yeah, my internet's still working. Uh-oh. I lost Chase here on my end. He's frozen. Wonder, yep. Yeah, he fell off. Wait for him to get back on. Great conversation, though. Hope you guys are enjoying it. Yeah, Impervious AI, it seems pretty fucking dope. Yep, here's coming back in. You're back, but I can't hear you.
Hey, sorry about that, man.
There you are.
That's
All good. I was just I was just ad-libbing there for a little bit while you were gone. I'm saying like for Impervious, but let's get back to the point you were making. What we were talking about.
Yeah, I was just saying that like every time politicians stomp their feet, right, they can't control it, which of course is a threat, right, to the power structure, and it's a threat to them, and it makes them impotent and useless, and so they then do the classic ad hominem reputation attack, which is increasingly hilarious because like it's like I don't know if they're delusional or like obviously they're trying to inform the parties that don't have a vested interest or aren't already informed because like it's just code, like it doesn't care. And I think we're going to see some pretty comical examples, like, you know,
we're already seeing them, right? Like Elizabeth Warren about the energy use, like it's all.
How do you think she's going to respond to the volcano? Right.
She won't have a response.
Right.
She'll selectively choose when she criticizes.
That's right. Or she'll just lie.
As they
why defend your position when you can just
you can just lie
and remain a U.S. senator?
Yeah.
It's far more convenient. Yeah. Should we talk about the volcano? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. Man, the craziest thing is over the weekend I had people tweeting at me because we talked about a rabbit hole recap, but apparently, like legitimately, like we now have an economic incentive to reduce the potential for like super volcano eruptions, because the way you would do that is you would poke hole to release pressure and hopefully cool down the magma part of like the magma cauldron to reduce the pressure and therefore probability of an eruption. So like if you poke holes, get this geothermal energy, turn it into Bitcoin, it can profitably reduce the chance for super volcano eruptions and destruction, which is pretty crazy.
Incredible. I think it was Scientific American. Now there's a few things scientific about Scientific American now, which is so sad because it's for a long time was America's longest running uninterrupted publication. But they did have something interesting a few years ago on supervolcanoes and the mechanism behind it. And like the cavity that so under Yellowstone, like basically it's just a different mechanism. But I do think that like the reality is like we're just beginning to touch geothermal. Like everyone would think Iceland and they'd say, oh, okay, like, you know, but that's isolated to Iceland and, you know, other, you know, abstract, non-replicable places. But like Central South America and Africa and a lot of the world, Southeast Asia it's very active. And so here are my thoughts though. Like, so I think Jack Mahler got a softball from Desiree that like, Jack, if you're listening, like I'd love to talk about this. You know, you're doing awesome stuff. So definitely not criticizing. I am very thrilled. But she, you know, Desiree was like, well, what are your thoughts on like the killer application of Bitcoin and of Lightning? And he's like, well, I think this is the killer application. I was like, well, okay, to go full circle, like, yes, sound money's fine, but we can't just like send money back and forth to each other until like we fix the world. Like there's all these other abuses of data, right? And what I would like to see, if you want a real revolution, but I'm not sure how much the powers to be in Central South America will be into it, I would like to see over time the effect that Bitcoin has on kind of the grip of various, if not totalitarian, then possibly historically, if not corrupt, then less than sound practices where like, hey, like, are you going to inadvertently, like from like a new economic theoretical model, like will economic liberty lead to freedom of speech and empowerment? And I think if the mechanism's there, I do think that's the natural progression. Just like with the United States, like once, you know, whether it's the Pilgrims or anyone, like once you flee the powers that can oppress and you have a mechanism, and I think I think once parties realize that you can do so much more than just payments, freedom of thought, like you can occupy a home, you can occupy territory, but you can't conquer a free mind. And so like, it is a threat. It's a threat to centralized authorities and governments. It's just another reason that like China may tolerate Bitcoin mining, well, I guess on any given day may or may not, but like it is a threat and it should be. And I'm interested to see that like, hopefully we can get far enough with some of these, volcanic tapping mining operations and start with economic prosperity. And it can lead to like free people that are like resilient and like, unconquerable. That's what I would love to see.
Me as well. That's why again, you have to get the tools that can build out that future into people's hands. So I think Bitcoin mining, obviously base layer, that is a tool, plug in a miner, access this free open monetary system. But
yeah,
as network grows, build Lightning. Certainly get that into people's hands. You can leverage Bitcoin in much different fashion than you can on chain, than like what you guys are doing on top. Like, let's build this developer stack that allows them to build tools that cannot be censored and cannot be stopped. And then you couple that with like the P2P transaction layer and the innovations that are happening there. Like in Brazil, I think it's staying in Latin America, the Satoshi.radio team creating transaction relay networks that allow you to bounce transactions off the moon, so you don't have to depend on internet service providers. It seems like the tool set's being built out. Would you agree?
I would agree. And I think that, like you said, it's not nascent technology, but we're at the early stages of the consequences of the side effects. And it's really, really exciting.
Yeah.
Like, we're right there. Yeah.
You can fix this. Bitcoin can fix all of this. But it takes work, right? Everybody's like, oh, the Bitcoin's like a dumb rock. It's like, no.
That's right. Well, that's why like narrative matters. Like, so, and I said at Bitcoin 21 that like, when I say that we're creating a new standard, I mean that as in like the next time there's a leak, the next time there's a hack, the next time your data is shared without your permission, the next time it's compromised, just know that like those parties and intermediaries and platforms, like they weren't just negligent. I think they were grossly negligent because they are aware of, and as long as people make clear that like, hey, that didn't have to happen, it was unnecessary, except for you chose to keep the data to exploit it and sell it and use it for ad targeting or to monitor, or to share it, or data control, or create walled gardens. But like, it didn't need to be that way to achieve your alleged purpose or function or feature of the app. And I think the tolerance, as long as we clarify the narrative of like, that didn't need to happen, what are you going to do about it? And then hopefully the free market helps, where other parties actually take a proactive stance. And we are talking to companies that are like, geez, if nothing else from the risk mitigation component, if you can take a target off our back and differentiate us, that's awesome. So it's funny because like that resonates with C-suite of some very large institutions, right?
Yeah, I don't want this problem. I don't want the potential of a leak on my conscience or in my business risk.
That's right. And just think about like, especially for international conglomerates or everything's digital, where if you're streaming around the world, instead of having to, how many intermediaries are there between you and a party consuming it in China, right? Or, Russia or Iran. And there are so many layers or mechanisms that can allow censorship and selective enforcement and favored treatment and disfavored treatment. And it's like, God, if you could just like always stream peer-to-peer, it provides you a mechanism to know that like, if it was received, which it should be, it will be uncorrupted.
Yeah. And then and everybody could be happy. Like the marketers could be happy and all that. They just have to engage peer-to-peer and say, hey, are you willing to share this data with me? He's like, yeah, give me a few sats. You can get this data and you can start pushing it that way, like if you want to.
That's interesting. Absolutely. Yeah, it will definitely change the model and I think economic incentive. But like, again, I think it's going to empower and create a whole, just like, what was it? there was some survey, right? I don't know how scientific it was, but of like kids in middle school. And it's like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And a disproportionate number of people, percentage, are like YouTube celebrities and Instagram. And, you know, right now that's like an ads model. But like, what if you could stream, you know, from whatever you were doing? Like, what if you could, there are so many mechanisms. What if everything you wrote and everything you said, you can make a little bit off of for your entire life? And by the time you're 30, you know, you've had interesting events, and, you know, I think there's a lot of opportunity. Or God, if you say you're in Taiwan and like the shadow of tyranny approaches and they initiate a more significant information campaign or disinformation campaign and an effort to intimidate, what if like you're a party that can just broadcast from the front lines and say like, hey, this is what's really happening here, and then receive information to see how it's portrayed from the outside world? And I think that's the greatest deterrent to kinetic action, is that like you can't conquer the minds of the parties you're trying to occupy. Like, you know,
they're moon bouncing the information and they're receiving it.
That's right.
Yeah, like try to stop the moon. Trying to, gee, you're gonna have to go blow up the moon.
Yeah, well, don't put it past them. You know, I don't know. There's some. I'm pretty sure they're like Nazi zombies on the moon, but don't quote me on that. It was just in a moon.
Before we wrap up here, like how are you guys handling the Lightning Network infrastructure? Are you even handling it, or are you just creating the tool set in which people plug in Lightning? Are you guys spinning up your own nodes, doing channel management, or are you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for the sake of onboarding, like we're supporting the network right now for the sake of, we want everyone, you know, all ships rise with the tide. And I believe you spoke with Graham. He's a friend of mine. He's a great dude, of Voltage Cloud. Mm-hmm. So we're working with Voltage. And I think one of the ways we see like the onboarding for everyday developers or platforms or services is like, instead of having to know anything about Lightning or to know anything about Bitcoin, right? If just part of your easy wizard, you know, simple tutorial setup, you go, okay, one, we will spin up a node for you via Voltage. If not, you can advance, run your own, you know, choose your own settings. Step 2, extend liquidity. If not, you can do it your own way, but it should be simple steps where like, you know, it's under the hood. They don't have to know anything about Lightning or Bitcoin. And there are these great mechanisms that allows you to quickly, instead of having to piece together everything, you can just, okay, we're going to use this API. And guess what? Now we have, you know, it's just literally like a line of code, right? And then you're streaming sats, you're streaming peer-to-peer, resilient, uncensorable communication channels for everything, and it can serve as like a backup redundant communication layer or emergency action message network. But yeah, so the way we see Lightning is we're just going to support it. We want to keep it decentralized. We want to simplify onboarding. We want to simplify use, and that's why I was plugging Voltage Cloud. They're going to do great stuff. And in the meantime, yeah, we're going to do some stuff there, but mostly just simplifying, providing the mechanisms, making it as smooth to onboard and develop, and create the standard where like, we don't care. Because like we've been, I'm sure you agree, like the value prop of Bitcoin is so self-evident that like a good argument, like you don't have to attack, you know, ad hominem, you don't have to attack, make superficial, suggestions or posture. Like the value prop is self-evident and it will win. Let's just like enable it. So people will be like, oh, that was Bitcoin. Yeah, Bitcoin's great. Or, oh, that was Lightning. Lightning's awesome. Like it enabled this. And like, they don't have to know anything about it. And so like, that is how we'd like to support it.
You're gonna be Beautyon's gonna be one of your biggest fans. That's something he's been preaching for years now. Is like, hey, you'll know Bitcoin's made it when everything's abstracted and people don't even realize they're using Bitcoin, right?
Totally.
And it's fascinating that Bitcoin and Lightning, which you guys are leveraging more specifically, just enables these very unique use cases. Like you literally need to leverage this to create the product that you want to create, correct? Like you arguably couldn't do it with anything else.
Absolutely. And Lightning has, they paved the way, right? They were the machete in the jungle clearing it. And we're like, hey, wow, you have this elegant infrastructure, real-time, liquidity, real-time settlement layer. Let's extrapolate that to data, to communications. Like, all programs without the network, right? Like, it's not Ethereum, it's not file, it's not whatever. It's, look, you can use this as is. It's not going to corrupt it. It's not going to slow it down. We're just going to build on that, have lines, sound money. And like, I think it's great. I'm looking at the volcano and I'm thinking, like, if I was in El Salvador or anywhere else, it, like, you know, it just makes central or the central authority or political authorities like what will be the incentive to like spin up you know, central currency or centrally controlled currency when everyone's just adopted it and they like it, and they're not going to care. It's like, okay, that's great, but we don't need you. And it should be secondary. And I think that, like, you know, it's going to just usher in, just like the internet itself did. This is like in Silicon Valley, like new internet, but it's literally rewriting the internet. If anyone takes anything else from this, and it's not hypothetical, it's not abstract, we're doing it. We've got great partners. And in the next few weeks, we're going to have a general release of our API so anyone can build on it. We're stoked.
So that was going to be my next question. What do you guys have in store? So it seems like you're going to launch a public API. Is there any way anybody can help? Is there anything?
Absolutely.
The freaks.
Yeah, the freaks. You can go to impervious.ai, and you know, you can use a burner. We don't care. Just provide your email, and you'll be notified of progress. You'll be notified of the timeline and development, and you'll be the first to know. Like, so, you know, it was hundreds. Now I think it's like a couple thousand signups to develop, requesting access to our API and our beta. So like, if you want to develop, if you want to consider it, if you want to explore the application, just like sign up. We will support it. We're going to have a lot of documentation. We're going to have tutorials. We're working, you know, closely with Lightning Labs, but with a bunch of other parties. And we would love for you to like be the initial use cases. And our VPN is just an example of what you can build on it. And we'll discuss like, hey, look at the specific applications, how that can be packaged. You can do that with your own. And so yeah, freaks.
Hell yeah.
Get on the bandwagon and independent minds, free minds, sound money. Let's do it.
Start building. Layer 3's here. Don't let anybody tell you that Lightning is vaporware. It seems like people are leveraging it to build pretty cool stuff. Chase and the Impervious being
thanks. Yeah. And Mark and Colin and our team that's rapidly growing. So yeah, and we're hiring, you know, we're hiring pretty quickly. So, you know, reach out. You can reach out to support@impervious.ai. We're accessible on Twitter. We're growing quickly. We may not be at a capacity to hire everyone we would like today, but at the end of summer, we're going to have another significant hiring spree. So like, just start the communication, start building, you know, toy with it, explore it, start a discussion. And like, we love the community and the support and your podcast. And I hope to revisit. We can talk about what that's looked like post-launch and development.
We'll definitely have to do a 6 month post-launch catch up where we like, hey, let's look at what everybody's built.
Yeah. Yeah. Everyone's on the new internet. There's freedom, prosperity, right? We've made central authorities, gatekeepers, and intermediaries irrelevant. And like, you know, we're bouncing shit off the moon, if not already on the moon. So like, I'm looking forward to it, man.
Well, Chase, I'm very happy to have connected with you over the last couple of weeks and to learn more about Impervious and see what you guys are building. Thank you for building what you're building.
Thank you.
Again, like I said, the way to get away from these dystopian models that we've been discussing for the last hour and a half almost is to equip people with tools that allow them to build things to protect against that. And it seems to be exactly what you're building in Impervious. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Looking forward to it, man.
All right. Well, I'm going to link to everything you just mentioned in the show notes. Guys, go check them out. Impervious.ai. That's all we got this week. Peace and love.
Thanks, Marty.
Yeah. Thank you.